Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's The Simpsons, Bart vs. the Space Mutants, brought to us by Flying Edge. One of the original Simpsons games, and was ported over to many home consoles at the time, including of course the NES, Game Gear, Sega Master System, and of course this version on the Sega Genesis. The game is notorious for being rather difficult and not the most well-made game, and it lives up fully to that reputation. So here we go with The Simpsons, Bart vs. the Space Mutants for the Sega Genesis. As we begin the game, we'll get an opening story and then the synopsis for level 1 before finally gaining control of Bart. The opening animation is actually pretty well done, and for the time, the graphics really aren't too bad, and definitely look better than some other versions of this particular title. In the first stage, as Bart, we have to go around and de-purplize all purple objects throughout the course of the level. At the bottom of the screen, you'll have which item you currently have equipped, which you can use using the C button. You have your score, as well as the amount of lives you have, how much time is left in the level if you end up running out of time to lose a life, as well as how many items that we still have yet to collect or destroy, or in this case, de-purplize. After grabbing the spray paint and spraying a couple of the early items, we then come to a small payphone. You're going to use the coin on it to do a prank call over to Moe's. Moe, of course, will get quite mad and come out of the bar, in which case you have to be ready with your can of spray in order to spray his apron, de-purplizing it. You're going to walk across the clothesline and drop towels onto a couple more items, and then spray the trash can before working your way over a couple of aliens. Random humans or citizens of Springfield will walk on by from time to time. You can use the X-ray glasses to see whether or not they're an alien or not, and if they're an alien, you can jump on their head in order to get a coin. Collecting a certain number of coins will spell out a particular Simpson character's name, in which case they will then help you at the boss of a particular level. Level number 1 is by far the most complicated, so I apologize if things go by a bit quickly as I'm de-purplizing everything. You'll have to make sure you buy a wrench in order to open up the fire hydrant. You then have to work your way across a couple of things using a ball to knock up into a paint can that will then spill on top of the candy shop. Move across the candy shop's ledges and windows in order to spray some pots, including, of course, dropping back down and making sure you're able to spray the trash can down here by the pet store. Make sure you buy at least 5 of the rockets to use, and then when you get over here, you're going to jump onto the keep off grass sign right in front of it, in which case a guy will try to stop you, and you have to spray him and make him no longer purple. Equip the rockets and use one in order to hit the bird off of the Jebediah Springfield statue in order to get rid of it, and thus another one of the items gone. Throughout the course of the levels, if you get hit more than once, you will end up losing a life and go back to wherever the previous checkpoint was. Before you do that long skateboarding segment, you want to make sure you have only 6 items left. If you have more than 6, do some backtracking and figure out which of the items you haven't de-purplized. Over here, you're going to use a rocket in order to hit the Bolorama sign, turning it red once it gets hit. Just past that, watching out for more aliens and getting past the Quickie Mart, there's a fountain, a bird bath that will be there that you can spray, and then you'll have only a couple items left. Use another rocket in order to hit the window. You can buy more than just the 5 rockets, and you may need to in order to help you out. Here we have to hit the windows on the Springfield Retirement Home, which should be the Springfield Retirement Castle. But either way, once you've hit all the windows, you've collected all the purple objects, and now continue over to the right until you make it to the boss encounter. Here, what you'll have to use is the bowling balls or objects from Maggie, in which case you'll throw them and you can hit them and roll them back at the boss here in order to damage him and defeat him. Once he goes down, you'll then move on to the next level. If you do not have enough of the purple objects decolorized, the boss does not spawn, so thus you won't be able to complete the stage. Of all the levels though, Stage 1 is honestly the most convoluted as far as the kind of mechanics of what you have to do. Though the last level is also arguably very much a pain of trying to find all the rods in the nuclear plant, since it's a bit of a maze, but honestly I still find level 1 the most difficult and frustrating of all the levels in the game. Now level number 2, instead of decolorizing objects, we actually have to collect hats, and we can do that either by finding the hats scattered around or by knocking them off of the random civilians' heads, and the same thing still applies as far as jumping on the aliens' heads in order to get the coins, and in this case, spell out March. Now right here, what you're going to do is jump on this platform multiple times, as it gives you a nice shortcut over one of the absolute tougher parts of platforming throughout the course of the mall stage. Something that is extremely useful as a secret, so make sure that you do that just to ease your way across without having to do that really hard platforming, especially on the lollipops, like the sticks that are rotating. You have to land on it correctly. It's just a huge pain. A little bit to the right, you'll have to actually battle a guy who is an alien, jump on his head multiple times in order to collect the hat, and you'll get a coin as well for doing so. There's some weird enemies in this level, not just the aliens, but also moving shoes and other objects that are alive and trying to hit you in order to do damage to you. There's a good amount of hats that you have to collect here, and there's actually a spot I'll be using to grind a tiny bit, because thankfully some civilians will respawn, allowing me to easily rack up those numbers. One of the hardest things about Bart vs. the Space Mutants, though, it has and always will be the controls. For whatever reason, they decided to make it with jump and run being the same, so if you want to be able to do a running jump, you have to actually press A and B together, and then hold down the button in order to actually run, which just ends up being very awkward a lot of times, and will take some getting used to for sure, so that you'll be able to do what you want to and be able to make it over tougher jumps. Take out the alien inside of the giant boot in order to get another hat and coin, and be sure to collect a couple more hats, including a football helmet along the side there. Now right here, if you do a nice little time jump, you can jump up high enough in order to grab some more hats along this way, even with dealing with the aliens. Now right here is near the very end of the level, and this is the spot that if you don't have all of the hats collected yet, what you'll want to do is move back and forth around this area, and you'll get citizens that come out of the various shops, and then you'll be able to knock the hats off of them and collect them so that you can bring down that total goal number. Once you're able to collect enough of them, then you can start heading off to the right. There is a couple more to the right before we get to the actual boss encounter that you can collect, but this is the last area to really grind on the various citizens so that you can get the hats that you need. Sometimes you may want to run a little bit farther over to the right and then come back. There's the two hats that the rabbits are jumping out of, and you can see that we still need to collect a few more before we can actually activate the boss fight. Once we finally have enough of the hats, it's time to continue off over to the right and work our way towards the boss encounter. You'll have to do some tricky platforming jumps here in order to make it across so you don't end up landing in the wet cement. You can actually get a Jebediah Springfield head, at least that's what I think it is, to spawn, which you'll get brief invincibility so you can run through. Over to the right, you'll have to battle, I assume, what is a mall cop, but you can jump on his head multiple times to take him out, get a coin if you still need him at this point. Thankfully, you only have to spell out Marge, which is one of the shorter names of the family. And then once you go up the escalator at the end, it's time to battle the evil killer babysitter that was on the very early seasons of The Simpsons. What you have to do is actually collect the bags that she throws and knock them back up at her. Marge, along the way, will actually fire and throw things out to knock bags out of her hand, which actually is more of a detriment to you than actually an aid, because you need the bags in order to actually knock them up and hit the babysitter with them. Either way, she'll go down and you'll be able to move on to stage number 3. Now, stage 3 is at the amusement park, and here you'll have to collect red balloons. Just like the previous level, there's a lot you have to collect, and thankfully, there is a spot at the end of the level where you'll easily be able to rack these up. There's a couple little mini games you can kind of mess with at the part of the stage, but we're just gonna kind of ignore most of that and continue along. Before we get to the end, though, and keep going to the right, we're gonna climb up this giant ladder here to the very top. Watching out for sometimes there will be things that fall down, you may have to jump off to the sides. When you get to the very top, what you can do is do a big leap off and time it right so you can hit this, in which case you'll be rewarded with a few coins, and then you can actually spend the coins on the bonus games if you want to over to the left. You only have to spell Lisa for this level in order to get her to help you out, but it's not something that you have to do in order to complete the game, so we're just going to actually focus on getting the balloons and then battle the boss even without Lisa's help. Now, this spot here with the dizzy doors is extremely annoying, because what you have to do is open all of the doors, and every time you open one, it will cause other ones to open or close, and I'm not really the best at this overall, and I know there's a much quicker way to complete it, but I just kind of mess around with it. Eventually I'm able to get it done before the time ends up running out. Like I said, I'm not the best, or this is even close to the best strategy for actually getting through this. Once it's all done, though, we're going to continue off to the right side. There's the giant pipes shooting air at the bottom, in which case we can use them to kind of float around to the various different platforms. Continuing over to the right, you'll come to the giant crusty head, and you can actually keep jumping up and actually climb around the crusty head, which is kind of creepy because it follows you with its giant eyes as you're platforming around it. Once you get over to the far right side, you'll come out of the tent and be out into the last area of this stage. There's a couple more balloons for you to collect here before continuing over to the right, and once you get over here, you'll have to get on the Ferris wheel, which does move really quickly, but thankfully there's a lot of platforms for you to easily jump on and not end up landing into the pit below. Now, this is the spot we're going to use to grind out the rest of the balloons that we need to gather. Walk a little bit to the right, a balloon will probably spawn, in which case you can climb up on this little building right here and grab the balloon, and then keep repeating the process until you dwindle down all the numbers you need, and then we can finally go on to the boss of stage number 3. Unfortunately, it's extremely boring, but once I get them all, it's time to battle Sideshow Bob. Since Sideshow Bob actually has gigantic feet, your goal is actually to land on his shoes, usually at the end of his toes, so that he'll actually hop up and down holding his foot. Make sure, of course, he doesn't end up landing on you, but this ends up being an extremely easy boss for you to battle and defeat, and once Sideshow Bob is done, we get to move on to stage number 4. Stage 4 takes place in a museum, and you have to shoot out exit signs. There's not that many that you have to destroy, in fact only 6 of them, and there's actually more than 6 for you to shoot, making this honestly the easier of the goals to complete in the game. Over here to the right, there's a crusty head inside of this glass case. If you actually do want to get it, you can jump on the glass case multiple times, in which case the glass case, the crusty head pops out of it for some reason, and you're able to collect it. This is a giant museum, as you can see, and you need to use your dart gun in order to hit the exit signs, as well as be able to do damage to certain enemies. You have a very limited amount of ammo, and that makes sometimes with the jumping and holding down the fire button a little bit difficult, as you'll need to in order to actually make certain jumps. Down here, you kind of have to mess around a little bit and finagle it so that you get the alligator to spawn, in which case you can jump on the alligator and ride it across the gap. Once you get a little bit over to the right, it will kind of double back, in which case another alligator should spawn. Sometimes you may have to do a little short jump in order to get it to work. It's kind of finicky, but either way, work your way across on the alligators. Climbing up this tree, knock out the monkey using your dart gun here, and then you have to try to avoid all these giant spiders moving up and down. Over here to the right, you have to battle this Venus flytrap type plant. Just jump on its head multiple times, and then the stalk you can actually use to fire at the exit sign over to the left. Watch out for the laser grids. They each have their own pattern to them, so memorize it and then pick the right opportunity to run underneath of them. Use the frame of the artwork in order to blast the other exit sign before then continuing over to the right, watching out for the various security guards that aren't aliens. The ones that are, of course, jump on their heads as we want to in order to collect the letters of Homer for this stage. Shoot another exit sign here, in which case now we only need to shoot one more exit sign, but we have to do some tricky platforming here first. Basically, disappearing and reappearing blocks. Always an annoying thing in any kind of platform game, so you have to time the jumps correctly, and once you get enough over to the right, then you have to make a pretty big leap of faith before it ends up disappearing. Right after that, though, you'll have more disappearing and reappearing blocks, this time in a little bit different of a pattern, but either way, the goal remains the same as you work your way over to the right. Avoid the snakes, jumping over them as you continue off to the right, and then have to move between some big spikes popping out the ground. Now for this segment, what you have to do with the statues in the background, you have to jump up on the statues in sometimes a random order, and an Ankh will end up coming out. Pick it up, and it will slowly raise the button in the middle of the screen, and once you've raised it enough, when you pick up an Ankh, if it doesn't get any higher up, that signifies that you've lifted it up enough, in which case you gotta jump on the button in order to then push it back in which case the whole screen shakes, and once it gets all the way back down, you'll be able to continue off to the right. Just a weird segment overall. Now, over to the right, the screen will scroll a little bit, get close to the door, and a mummy will spawn. Jump on its head multiple times to easily defeat it. And then continue now to the right, and you have to shoot out one more exit sign that we have left. Easiest way to do so is by heading to the right, jumping into the picture frame here, picking up another gun, and then doing a nice little jump shot. And once you've completed it, it'll then have all goals achieved and proceed to the right at the bottom, but there's actually a little bit more to the stage left. Here is a pretty tricky jump where you have to wait for the thing to float on down and then jump to it, and then you have a series of like dinosaur bones that you'll have to move across while also avoiding flying dinosaurs. Overall, just a completely really weird kind of setting is this level in general, but the hardest part is honestly platforming, much more so than dealing with enemies. Over here to the right, you're going to jump up and fire at the dinosaur multiple times. It will fire projectiles out at you, but if you're far enough away, it can't hit you and you can easily hit it. Then jump on its head and continue off to the next section of the museum itself. Here we can collect the last letter of Homer and watching out for some more grids before we make it to the boss. Now for the boss fight, all you gotta do is jump on his head multiple times. Homer will throw down oil slicks that can cause him to slip up a little bit, but it ends up being an extremely easy fight. Even without Homer's assistance, this fight is a complete breeze, and once he's done, we move on to the final level of the game. Now, the nuclear power plant is broken up into multiple floors. There's 5 floors in total, and you have to collect 16 glowing rods in order to complete it. Bart can only hold 4 at a time. Once you have 4 in your inventory or any amount, you'll have to dump them off to Marge, who will then take them down to the basement. Once you get all 16 into the basement, the level is complete. The placement of the rods is the same every time, along with the passcodes needed for each floor. I don't know if you have to get a passcode from Lisa before you can actually enter it into the door, but either way, talk to Lisa every time that you end up seeing her in order to get the passcode, and write it down if you need to, but it's always going to remain the same every time you play the game. The key, though, to remember in this whole playthrough is when you're working through this level, Maggie appears randomly at a few spots. Once you know where Maggie is, make sure you memorize where Maggie is. That way you know where to come back to at the end. Once you've collected 15 of the nuclear rods, the 16th is actually in Maggie's possession. And if you don't know where she is or when you find her, that's how you get the 16th rod and actually complete the level. You're unable to do so until you find Maggie, but only after getting all 15 of the other rods. For me, I was lucky, she's on floor 4, so I know where I'll have to come back to later on. Once you have 4 rods in your possession, though, unfortunately, you can't pick up any more until you dump them off to Marge. So we worked our way along the left side here, collected 4, and now work our way all the way back down to the first floor. I now know where Maggie is, so at least I can come back to it easily, and then once back on the first floor, and unfortunately, every time you go back through these doors, you have to put the code in. And the game is very finicky for where you can stand to put the code in. You'll have to press the A button in order to activate the panel and then enter it. But it's kind of weird, like sometimes, like even though I'm right in front of it, it won't activate. And the same goes for some of the doors that you have to deal with as well. Just the going in and out of the doors and accessing the elevators is pretty tricky, honestly. It's just another mess up with the control scheme of the game. I also love the fact that Lisa kind of like forms like from like a jelly slime on the ground and just kind of pops up like she's made of nuclear waste, or she's like from the secret world of Alex Mack. She just kind of forms from a puddle on the ground and then ends up telling us the code for each of the floors. I don't know, just something weird about that whole aspect. Collect the glowing rod in the left corner here of the 4th floor. You can drop it off the Marge if you want to, and then go to the right side and pick up the other one, also located on this floor. Get Marge to respawn. Thankfully, you can get her to respawn rather easily, and then go back to the elevator and head back on down. Certain elevators will only go to certain floors, so you have to use the right elevators in the right sections in order to get where you're going. If you follow the path I'm taking, it is the fastest path to try to find all the rods, be able to get back to Marge relatively easily, and be able to get through this stage with least amount of hassle, though it's still a bit of a pain overall because of the maze-like setting to it all and what you're trying to accomplish. Using the door on the far right, we're going to head down to the bottom floor here, watching out for this alien. At any point, if you find one of the boxes of donuts, you can actually use them to summon Homer, who will then actually get rid of all the creatures on screen. So that's what the usefulness of actually finding those boxes of donuts scattered throughout the course of the level. For the most part, though, I can usually avoid the aliens, just kind of wait for the timing on it in order to actually be able to get past them. Over here to the left, we find Lisa again, as she forms in and out, and we get the next rod. On the other side is another one of the rods, and then we can go back to the elevator and head on to the 5th floor. Now, unfortunately, we only have room here for one of the rods, and there's actually 2 on here. There's one on to the right side and one to the left side. So pick whichever one you would like to grab first, and then head on back to the elevator, and we have to head back in order to find Marge. Unfortunately, I end up getting hit here. But either way, we have to go dump off the rods here. If you head on back down to the 1st floor and work your way back over to the right side here, you can go up the door here onto the 2nd floor. Once here, head back to the left, and unfortunately you have to watch out for more of these aliens as we do so and go through this door. Now, usually Marge will actually come right as we get past this door. Sometimes she ends up spawning, sometimes she doesn't. If you kind of go back and forth a little bit here, you can usually get her to spawn. If for some reason she's not right there, sometimes I go right down to the 1st floor and drop off the rods there. But either way, once you've done that, head back to the 2nd floor and then work your way back all the way through until we get back to that 5th floor where we can pick up the other rod that unfortunately we just didn't have room for at that moment. Sometimes trying to get the elevator to go where you want, or just even going with the doors, like I said, it's a hassle. But eventually I'm able to get back to this floor where I'm able to locate the next rod. There's Lisa once again to give me a combination for this particular floor. But I'm going to head back to the elevator now and head on back to the 1st floor. We only have a couple more of the rods left to gather, but once we get back to the 1st floor, head on over to the right to where the door is located. Now, instead of getting out on the 2nd floor, we're going to head up to the 3rd floor, watching out for the aliens, and grab the rod located here. From there, head back into the door and then head up on to the 4th floor. Once here, head to the left, watching out for more aliens. You'll have to input the code here on this door in order to get through, which is 41. And right inside, though, is the next of the collectible rods. Unfortunately, the door closes right as we go through, so we have to enter 41 again in order to get back on through. Go back down multiple floors until you make it to floor number 2 and head back over to the left. Once over here, Marge can spawn, so you can drop off the rods that you have. We should now have only 3 left to collect, with the last one, of course, being where Maggie is. So we only have 2 more that we're going to have to track down. Use the elevator here to go up to the 4th floor, and there's a rod glowing over to the far right. A little bit hard to see just because of the positioning of it with all of the canisters. But once you have that, head back to the elevator, and now head to the 5th floor using this elevator. Right outside the door is Marge, which you can drop off the rod that you've just picked up, and then head on over to the left where the next panel will be. Use the panel and enter number 21 into it, and then go to the left and grab the last of the rods scattered throughout the plant. With this in our possession, go back to the door and you can drop it off to Marge. You have to make sure that you've dropped it off before you can then go to Maggie in order to finish things up. From where we are, if you follow the path I've taken, you can actually go all the way down to the first floor from here. If you go all the way to the very bottom, that's where the basement is, which will show you all the glowing rods and everything that we've collected, which is not where I meant to, but either way, it's kind of cool. You can see everything there. Back on the first floor, thanks, we know where Maggie is already. We just have to go left here on the first floor, go back to this panel door, then go up a couple of floors to the door on the far left, and once you make contact with Maggie, the game will end, and you get to sit back and enjoy the ending to Bart versus the Space Mutants. No final boss, no nothing, just touch Maggie, and that's how you get the last rod, and it instantly goes to the end, and you can enjoy that ending. And there you go. Bart is on Mount Rushmore. He celebrates and jumps for joy for as long as you want to sit here and watch it. Anytime you press start, you'll then go back to the startup screen. You can start the game all over again. But with that, that will wrap up this episode of Play It Through. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up or commenting down below. If you enjoyed this Play It Through, be sure to check out the NES version of Bart vs. the Space Mutants I did a couple of years back. Or if you want something a little bit different, check out my countdown for the 10 best licensed games based on movies, television shows, cartoons, comic books, the 10 best that the NES had to offer. I also need to thank all the members of my Patreon. You guys are keeping this channel alive and allow me to keep producing the content that I do on a weekly basis, so thank you all once again so much for all that continued support. I also want to thank you for watching the video, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.